Good evening from Nairobi, Kenya, to all our distinguished panelists and ladies and gentlemen at the audience watching and listening to this high-level webinar. First of all, I would like to thank you all for making it, and I'd like to thank our distinguished panelists for being here with us today, taking time out of their busy schedule, and AGRA, on behalf of the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa. As the moderator, I'd like to welcome you. I'd like to introduce our panelists who are online. I'd like to start with Professor Shenggen Fan, who's a professor of agricultural policy at the China University of Agriculture. Dr. Haile Gabriel Abebe, who's the Assistant Director General and Africa's representative for the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations. I'd also like to welcome the UN Special Envoy for the Food Systems Summit 2021, and also the President of the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa, Dr. Agnes Kalibata. Welcome, Madam. And also I'd like to welcome the Vice Minister for Agriculture for the Republic of Mozambique, Mr. Olegario Banza. You're welcome, lady and gentlemen. On this note, I would like to invite Dr. Agnes Kalibata, the President of AGRA and the UN Secretary General Special Envoy for the 2021 Food Systems Summit, to please give us her welcome remarks. Madam.
Thank you, Apollos, for those introductory remarks. And let me thank Professor Shenggen for being with us today. It's good to see you again after, having worked with you so closely in IFPRI. It's really good to see you on that side of things. And it's good to see you, Dr. Bebe. We seem to be in every meeting together, so it's really good to see you, and I welcome you. And Honorable Minister, we really appreciate you making it today. Mozambique is one of the countries we are working with, and we look forward to hearing your insights and ideas. This meeting is supposed to be opened by the Her Excellency, the Commissioner for Agriculture and Rural Development, Madame Sako, but she's been in meetings, and I was following her today. I mean, it's unbelievable how much these days we are meeting because of the new modes of meeting we have adopted. So she was in meetings earlier on. She's going to be joining us, and I just wanted you to appreciate that she's late, not because she wants to be late, but because she really is finishing up and wrapping up other meetings. So she will be joining us, and we look forward to that conversation with her. Now, in terms of the work that is ahead of us, and the theme that has been put on the table, the idea of building back better and looking at resilience in the face of COVID, resilience of food systems in the face of COVID, I just wanted to step back a little bit and say, even before COVID, we here in this continent were having challenges. I know I said this a number of times in other meetings, but sitting with you here and being able to have a conversation around what our food systems are delivering and what they are not able to deliver versus the 2030 agenda is something that is extremely important to us. It's something that is critical given climate change and how things have changed since 2013. It's like events, even the science has probably not been able to keep pace with the pace at which climate will change. And what has happened in the reality for smallholder farmers that we work with and other people that are in this sector, it's in the food sector, it's just how frequent, the level of frequency of shocks that we're experiencing. I mean, here in Kenya, we were getting used to the fact that fall armyworm is around, and then we now have locusts that have not happened in the last 30 years, but also then we know that we are moving from one drought to another drought. And really this is beginning to impact farmers in a very serious way, in the sense that their capital base is extremely shaky. They can't manage this, but it's also affecting SMEs. Now, this is all happening in the context of COVID. And we know that things have gone terribly wrong with COVID, especially with regards to how it has impacted our economies. So the idea here with this seminar is to really be a little bit more focused on the place that we see from a food systems perspective, but also on many of us here are working in the agriculture sector and understand the place and importance of the agriculture sector for this continent. And just being able to really think through how we can put more energy, reignite the sector, inject some form of energy into the sector, and get it to stay the course. Because so many things are happening. We need this particular sector to stay the course, given COVID, given climate change. But what can we do and how can we do it, given all the challenges that our countries are having? So that's really the context with which we come to this meeting. It's not the only meeting that is discussing this, but we really want to brand it and bring it down from an agricultural perspective, but also from a food systems perspective and from a smallholder perspective, given climate change, and given COVID, given the battering of our SMEs that we've seen. How can we keep things going, and how can we strengthen the sector to be a little bit more resilient? What should be our focus? What are we learning, Schengen? You're with China, huge learnings from there. What are the opportunities for us from that part of the world? And FAO has done a lot of work that shows that hunger has been increasing for the last 6 years in a row. Are we going to be able to change direction, to turn the corner with regards to coming through on zero hunger by 2030? Given the destruction that COVID has put in our wind, if I might say, so in our sail. So really so much to do, but this is happening against some good things as well. We just launched the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, which provides opportunity, right? Which provides a huge opportunity for us. And I just want to help you know that, again, I want to bring out this number, that we are now importing $50.5 billion worth of food we are perfectly capable of producing. And in 2008, we were importing $15 billion worth. Can you just imagine how much is going on? I make it real for people. Sometimes I say, can you just imagine how much jobs we're exporting by buying $15 billion worth of food that we can produce from someone else? So this is really some of the things that we can put in context and think about how we look at some of these as opportunities that we can use to build resilience. Yeah. So really, I look forward to this conversation. I look forward to critical texts that I can also take back to the Food Systems Summit as part of what we are doing from a continental perspective. So thank you again, Apollos, and I hand back over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Kalibata, and very important points you've raised around the shocks, the impact on food systems, and the fact that Africa is losing so much. We hear you very well. There's been more than a 300% increase in actually in food imports within the last 12 years, from 15 billion to 50.2 billion. That is not a joke. So from your opening remarks, it means we've exported more jobs in the last 12 years than probably other continents. We don't know yet, but that's a lot that we're losing. And the sad thing, like you said, is about the fact that it is food that Africa can produce. It's not like it's food that we can't, and that's really critical. And also thank you, Dr. Kalibata, for raising the fact that Her Excellency, the Commissioner, will be joining us shortly, and we will be looking forward during this discussion with your chat with her, so that we can glean from the reflections from both of you as leaders, but also as women, and I think that's important. So we're very pleased, and also on behalf of all of us who are gender sensitive, apologies that you seem to be the only woman in the room for now, but I'm sure Commissioner Sako will join you shortly. So please bear with us, and we will be careful not to not to lose sight of that fact that there's a woman in the room. But I think it's also important that you're not just any woman. You are you're unique in your own sense, and I think we all respect that. So thank you for those opening remarks. Can I go straight to you, Dr. Fan? You know, at some point we will be hearing from Dr. Kalibata and the Commissioner Sako, you know, on their reflections on the continent. So I think it's very helpful that we're going to start with you, because you've actually led IFPRI for a number of years. You know, so you've looked at food policy research and provided thought leadership over the years. And currently, you're now leading a very you know, great team, a team of experts at the China Agricultural University, as you chair, you know, the food policy team there. Can I ask you, based on the shocks that we've seen in the continent, and we want to be self-sustainable as far as food is concerned, but also ensure that we're building systems, you know, what can we learn from China? What lessons, what are your reflections, you know, from what we see that's happening as a result of the pandemic, you know, and what can we learn from China? But also, what do you think that Africa can, you know, can leap on, you know, going forward?
Yeah, thank you, Paulo. Let me first thank Dr. Agnes Kalibata for the long-term partnership, friendship with IFPRI, International Food Policy Research Institute, when I was a DG there. So we work so well. We learn so much from each other. We really support each other. Let me thank her for doing that. And I'm also so happy to see some of my friends, Dr. Abebe, Boaz, and also Apollos. I think, you know, without the pandemic, I would have traveled to Africa probably every month, you know, from China. I really hope that this pandemic will be gone, so we can continue to travel. So we go to Africa, you come to China. I think exactly 1 year ago, we were in the middle of struggle to contain the pandemic, to recover from the shocks. So the food supply chains in China were severely affected, you know, particularly fruits, vegetables, dairy products, meat, and so on. But through government efforts, through policy changes, I'm happy to see that the whole economy, the whole agriculture sector has resumed to normal. I think it's really very timely for the AGRA to organize this debate, how we are going to build back better, you know, to build a resilient and a stronger food system after COVID-19. So I could share some of our experience, our observation from China, so with our African friends, how we can tackle these challenges we are facing and will continue to face. So number one is we must continue to monitor the food price and the markets very closely. I think FAO is doing that, CGI is doing that, the governments are doing that. I'm particularly happy to see that AGRA is monitoring the food price situation in Africa. So I have followed that very closely. As economists, we know that whenever there is a price problem, we know that there's a food security problem. So let's do that. So that's the first thing. The second thing is during the shocks, particularly pandemic, we must make sure that supply chain continue to work. So this needs to create so-called green channels for health products, for food products to be shipped from one point to another without much interference. Obviously, we have to protect our food workers, protect the truck drivers, and so on. But given all this, we must make sure that food can be transported from supply to consumption, destination without much interference. And we also have to make sure that smallholder producers will be able to continue to produce, you know, grains, fruits, vegetables, dairy products, and so on. So the government must provide physical financial support for them to do that, you know, whether it's through tax concessions or through direct support. I think this is must during the crisis like COVID-19. Now, number three is a social protection. We know that lots of poor and hungry people are particularly vulnerable during crisis. Food cash or other daily needs must be shipped to them. They must have access to all these daily products, but also make sure that the social protection programs can be linked to nutrition improvement, can be linked to productivity enhancement in long run. So we call it productive safety net. I think in Africa, we have seen that in many countries already. So number 4 is the investment. We knew that, just like Agnes said, that even before crisis, we were already facing a lot of challenges, productivity issues, food not adequate enough food. Africa is importing so much food, $50 billion from international markets and so on. So here the investment must be enhanced, must be scaled up, both domestic from both domestic sources and international sources, to invest in improving rural roads, feeder roads, improving R&D system and irrigation. So this will provide a base fundamentals for long-term resilient, strong, and to some extent inclusive food systems. I think China have done that for the last 40, 50 years, and Africa can do the same. The number 5 is the zoonotic diseases. We know that this time and before, for example, Ebola, even HIV/AIDS, many pandemics came from animals. And in the past, we have exploited our natural resources. So the human being and our nature have become very close. So the diseases in animals can jump into human beings very quickly. So how can we make sure that in our future food system, we keep some proper distance between human beings, animals, and other natural resources? Many countries have already introduced certain policy regulations to make sure that that will not happen, and also wet markets, these sort of informal markets, to properly regulate them, to properly provide technical support to improve the infrastructure, so make sure that diseases will not jump to human beings. Then finally here, I wanted to mention that the global collaboration, international collaboration, will be even more critical after COVID-19. So one word, we only have one planet, and we need to make sure that we share the knowledge, share the information, share the resources, so we can tackle the challenges that we all face together, like climate change, pandemic diseases, and so on. So here, sitting in China, we're very eager to work with our African friends, whether it's from Rwanda, from Ethiopia, Senegal, Nigeria, and Mozambique. So use the South-South cooperation as an opportunity to share the knowledge information. So my university and all universities in China, research academy, research institutions are really, really eager to work with you. And here, after the pandemic, and I already recommended the universities to travel to Africa, to some of the selective countries, so we can tackle some of the challenges together. So I will stop over here. I will be very happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you, Apollo.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Fan. And this is really very helpful. The 6 things you've mentioned, and the last you talked about was partnerships, about global collaboration. And I think that's really important. Before I move on to the next panelist, I would like to please kindly ask participants to please post your questions on the chat. We will do our best to pick them up and ask our panelists to kindly respond to them. Dr. Fan, I note also your point on the issues around keeping the supply chains running. I mean, that's been a difficult issue for quite a number of countries, and we also know that that has actually denied quite a number of people access to foods because of very long supply chains, and resulted in increased hunger spots. So I will ask you to think through that, because we probably will be coming back to you, to discuss that further. But Dr. Abebe, I know you've, with your years of experience, first of all, as over the years, but before this role that you sit in now as the director for the Department of Rural Economy and Agriculture, where you worked very hard, with member states in the continent to raise the potential of agriculture as as a pathway to Africa's economic growth and development, before you moved to the FAO, where you're leading, a very large team of experts and colleagues to actually ensure that, the profile of agriculture is not just a branding, but that we are seeing transformation that is leading to economic growth. But the shocks have also, put us, or rather, negated some of the gains that we have made in the sector. But from where you sit under your leadership, we know that you've been responding to other shocks that happened before the COVID pandemic, which included the fallout armyworm, as well as the low-cost invasion. What are you learning from the way FAO is responding to this, and how are you thinking about within your response the balancing between the short-term recovery and the long-term resilience?
Thank you, Apollos, Dr. Kalibata, Professor Shengam-Fan, Honorable Vice Minister. It's a pleasure to join you in this very, very important and timely seminar. Thank you for inviting me to join. Now, this is a very interesting question. What are we learning? You are absolutely right, Apollos, that we're not dealing with one shock in Africa. And in fact, this is one of the features that would make the Africa case quite distinct from perhaps other regions, that we're dealing with multiple shocks that are overlapping. And we're not talking about a particular country or a particular sub-region. We're talking about several countries in Africa who have to deal with these multiple shocks, some climate extreme related, others related to economic slowdowns or downturns, conflicts. Where is it that now in Africa you don't talk about conflicts? Transboundary diseases and pests. You have mentioned about the fall armyworm and now the desert locust. We were also dealing with migratory pests, migratory locust, red locust in Southern Africa. So in Africa, we're dealing with multiple shocks that are overlapping, and this is one of the contexts that would make efforts towards transformation, towards resilience building unique. Perhaps a second feature related to this that would make African case somewhat unique is also the response, particularly of the public sector, the absence, namely the absence of effective and adequate, let me use the term stimulus packages. This is one of the things which we learn from the way in which developed countries have responded to shocks, important shocks during COVID, but also before, during the economic crisis, stimulus packages. African governments, with perhaps very few exceptions, could not introduce this kind of packages because of, I suspect, two reasons. One is obvious, and that is fiscal constraints. They don't have the capacity. Another one is, or could be, less commitment. So it also exposed the fragility of the systems that exist in the countries. And so the focus on social protection, the focus on protection of the vulnerable groups and communities becomes a priority. And the problem in Africa is that this segment of the population is big and growing. We are talking about several millions. If I give you examples, I think these are already known. Even before COVID-19 pandemic, there were about 235 million hungry people in sub-Saharan Africa in 2019. And this includes 66 million people in acute food insecurity. So when COVID hit, it complicated this problem, but added a different dimension to this. So how did FAO responded to this? The first was because initially when COVID hit last year, there was this concern that all of the attention at global level, at the national level, was mainly on public health, because COVID-19 is a public health concern, and it's appropriate for the response to also focus on the public health concern. But we were worried that this exclusive focus to the public health aspects might undermine the capacities of livelihoods to really absorb this shock in terms of food security and nutrition, but in terms of even sustaining economic activities. So the immediate measure that we took was to really seek partnerships. We worked with the African Union Commission and other partners to raise the profile of the food security and nutrition and agriculture broadly aspects to the policymakers. You recall the ministers of agriculture was the first among the sector ministries who came together within the African Union context to discuss the issue and provide guidance. A task force was set up to support the implementation of priority actions identified and agreed upon, and then FAO was in a position to provide what it can do best in terms of supporting policy design and implementation, supporting assessments in the countries, designing and implementation of programs to support social protection, among others, as well as supporting important activities along the value chain to make sure that the supply chain is not disrupted. FAO itself came up with a COVID-19 response and recovery program with about 7 pillars, ranging from the immediate humanitarian response to long-term resilience building. So the most important lesson that needs to be taken, I think, for Africa is that there should be no other priority than building resilience of livelihoods and agri-food systems in Africa. It is a solution because the background is vulnerability, extreme vulnerability, and inadequate systems and structures to absorb the shocks. Over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Abebe. Very, very, very valid points that you've raised, and I take note of the fact that you were spot on when you said that pre-COVID there was some level of fragility. So it would sort of suggest and imply in some way that COVID actually may not have been a root cause of some of the weaknesses and the challenges we seem to see today, but it actually triggered and led to the challenges we're seeing as a result of the COVID. And I take note of your point on an integrated approach. Thank you for pointing it out very clearly that an exclusive response from a health perspective is going to be detrimental to livelihoods and food security in the continent. So that integrated approach that looks at the health systems, the food systems, including the issues around the social safety net, is critical. And I'm sure that from an integrated perspective, we might want to consider what that means, in building back better. and probably is something we will kindly ask you to think about speaking to when we do come back to you. Thank you, Dr. Abebe. Before I come to you, Honorable Minister, I would like to welcome to, I think, Dr. Kalibata's delight to know that you are no longer the only woman here. Her Excellency, the Honorable Commissioner for the Department of Rural Economy and Agriculture, as well as the sustainable environment, is now online. She's trying to work on her video, but she's joined us online by phone. Your Excellency, you're welcome, and I must confess that we were very happy to have you here.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. I'm really having a very serious connectivity problem. That's why I'm not able to connect. This is a new tool that I'm not very familiar. I'm familiar with Zoom, so I'm really having a lot of problem of connection. I'm prepared to take part of this important dialogue, but I'm having communication problem.
Apollos on mute, and I think the rest of us need to mute also.
Okay. Oh, thank you, Dr. Kalibata. Your Excellency, thank you for being here, and we're really sorry about the challenges you're facing with the tool. I think that's also a learning we should consider. We're learning more as a result of what we're facing within the context. And Dr. Kalibata and the rest of the panelists are happy to have you. I would also like to welcome Professor Hamadi Boga, the Principal Secretary for Agriculture, Livestock and Fisheries at the Ministry of Agriculture here in Kenya. Professor Boga, Bwana PS, welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'm also not able to show the video for some reason, but it's better that way because I'm still in the jam.
Okay.
I had left the office before the meeting had started.
Understandably, Bwana PS, and it's good to have you with us. We will be coming to you shortly. I would also like to welcome Professor Joachim von Braun. Professor, you're very much welcome, and it's good to have you. We can see your video on. You could please speak to let us know that you can hear us, sir.
I hear you very well.
Thank you, Professor Joachim. Can I kindly now go to, and we will be coming to you with, to speak. Can I kindly go to you, Honorable Minister? Honorable Minister Banze, I'm very pleased that you're able to make it, because this then speaks to us having a clearer understanding on what is happening on the ground. If you heard Dr. Abebe when he was, sharing his thoughts, he actually talked about, keeping the supply chains running, as well as looking at safety nets. But he also talked about an integrated approach, which then ensures that we're not looking at it exclusively from a health systems challenge, but also a food systems and it's a social protection problem. And if we begin to look at it from the whole ecosystem, we see that an integrated approach works very well. And I'm sure some of the panelists will be speaking to that as we go along. But hearing from you, being on the ground, talking to the citizens and responding directly to the people who are most affected, or who have been most affected by this pandemic from a food systems perspective. Can you please tell us, what are you learning from your response as government, to the shocks regarding food security and dealing with hunger, as well as building back better, for your people? And what do you think governments can do more, to ensure that we're balancing the short-term response versus the long-term resilience? Honorable Minister.
Thank you. I don't know if you hear me.
We can hear you very well, sir.
Dr. Apollo, the respectful Dr. Kalibata, all protocol observers, and thank you for your invitation and including us as a ministry to play this role of finalist in this webinar. So, in the ground here in Mozambique, our country, because of its geographical position, close to the ocean, we are used to be one of the most exposed country to climate change negative impacts. You know that. But as this is not enough to make us suffering a lot, there is also COVID adding to that situation. But what we already have in the ground is that the agricultural or food system structure here in Mozambique, we have some 98, more than 98, close to 99% of our farms here in Mozambique are small-scale farmers, and about less than 0.5%, 0.5% is
Honorable Minister, I think we've lost your volume. Can you hear us? If you can hear us, I think you're now muted, Honorable Minister. Honorable Minister, can you hear us? We can't hear you. It sounds like you're muted. Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. We are trying to empower medium-scale farmers in order to make them be helpful for small-scale farmers, because you know that here in our country, small-scale farmers are spread all over the country in remote areas. If in these remote areas there is no an aggregator farm, it will be very, very, very difficult to make any plan to improve infrastructure that can be helpful for agricultural development. So the program we have some 3-5 years, some 2-3 years ago is our challenge is to make these medium-scale farmers to be a little bit stronger. We give them stimulus so that they can grow and help at least 100 or 200 small-scale farms around them. So this improves the value chains, because we are trying to bring these small-scale farmers into commercial, industrial, and food system value chains in our countries. Doing that, we are also paying attention for young people and women who are mostly affected by natural disasters and also COVID in these times. But this program we have gives stimulus for them in terms of financial support, extension services, and also mechanization services, so that who has his farm prepared to be given mechanized services, they can use that, and this can be deducted in the production costs during the production process. But something we have learned from that we have learned that without a very well-structured agricultural system, it will be difficult to provide agricultural inputs for all smallholder farms that are the main producers here in Mozambique. And also, we will face difficulty in commercialization to buy this product from the smallholder farms. And since COVID have installed itself in our agricultural system, there were some advantages and also some disadvantages, mostly, because what we learned is, for example, for some commercial crops we had, like tobacco and the cashew nuts, there were no problems in commercialization of commercial crops that helps smallholder farmers to get cash. But the prices, the global price of these products have came down, and this affects severely our rent. I don't know if in English I can say that, but if we go to, for example, the market for cashew nuts, what we found is most of our industry have came to a situation that they have to close, some of them, and the prices externally have went down. And what happens is we have to be very well prepared. That is the lesson. The most important lesson we get is that in some crops, crop by crop, we have to have a special strategy to face the difficulties in times of shocks like pandemic shocks, climate shocks, and so on. What we are used to say here in Mozambique is to say, when you produce bicycles, it's a mean of transport, but it's not the same technology, not the same market. You will go to trade with motorbikes, with cars and airplanes. All of them are means of transport, but the production system is different. How the use is different. It's the same like you produce maize, you produce tobacco, you produce cashew nuts, you produce tomato. Each one of them must be how to say, who can help me? Must be approach it in different manners, because each one of them is a food crop, but is used in different manner and in different conditions. And even the technologies we use to produce each one of them are different. It means that crop by crop, we have to have a special strategy so that the country can be competitive in 1, 2, 3, 4, or 10 of them. That will be our main challenge now. So I don't know if I have tried to put because my English is so bad, and I don't know if you have understood me or not. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. I think you were really very clear. And just to let you know that your points, are very well taken and spot on. We note, the issue you raised, most recently in your comments, which was about the last point you made on the power of technologies, in making sure that food crops, are well harvested, transported. So that's linked to the infrastructure that support, that supports the supply chains in movement of food, and making sure that people are able to access them, to protect the foods, which probably may be linked to, what we see, some of the challenges we've seen as a result of the pandemic with post-harvest losses, which is, leading to even more waste of food. And And we also note, the fact that your government is empowering the SMEs. And I think that's really a very important point, because SMEs are the lifeline of many livelihoods within the continent, particularly SMEs in the agricultural sector. And we're very pleased to see that. At some point, we probably might be, coming back to you to ask you, how the government has empowered these SMEs, and how you see technologies as critical to scaling up, productivity and driving inclusive agricultural transformation. So thank you, Honorable Minister, for those very, very clear points. Before I do, call out some of the questions that participants are asking. There are lots of questions, but for time's sake, we will ask our panelists to respond to some of them. I'd like to kindly ask Her Excellency, the Honorable Commissioner for Rural Economy and Agriculture, as well as Sustainable Environment at the African Union Commission, to make a few remarks. Madam Commissioner, we're very glad that you have been re-elected. We know you were doing a lot when you were trying to deal with the pandemic when it started last year, including how you were trying to mobilize member states, and others. You've heard from the minister in Mozambique. We would like to kindly ask you, Madam Commissioner, in a very, a few lines, because we will be asking yourself and Dr. Kalibata actually will be inviting you, to speak with her, and we will be learning from both of you this evening. But we'd like to ask you to please, from an AU perspective, what do you see as the issues that governments are facing, generally, and how are those challenges, probably impacting on inclusive agricultural transformation in the continent? Madam Commissioner.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So thank you very much. Good afternoon. I will first of all like to thank my dear sister, Dr. Agnes Kalibata, for inviting me to join this webinar. Unfortunately, due to technology, I couldn't, get connected on due time. And good afternoon, honorable ministers. Good afternoon, all the honorable ministers present in this important event. I also like to acknowledge Cabinet Secretary responsible for agriculture, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, all protocol duly observed. I would first of all also like to thank Dr. Kalibata, the president of AGRA, also the UN SDG Special Envoy for the 2021 Food System Summit. I'd like to thank her for all the support she gave me during my first tenure. We had a very good working collaboration with AGRA, and I will continue because COVID-19 has taught us that we cannot work in silo. We have to work together. We have to bring good coordination and synergy together so that we can respond on all these shocks that this important sector is facing. So your question was, to be very short, your question was really what are the main constraints that the member states, mostly ministers of agriculture, are facing. I think it's lack of defining what is the priority, proper policy. What is the priority in really building back better, after the COVID-19? And this agriculture sector is one of the key. I mean, we all know that agriculture is the engine for social development, transformation on the continent. But the key issue is that there is not enough investment in agriculture. There's not much investment. So if we don't invest in this sector, we cannot feed our nation. We know that by 2050, the population of Africa will be 2.4 million. And today we have about 5 billion of export bill on food. So all this tendency, we need to reverse it. We need to build back better, and I think lesson learned from COVID-19, bring such good initiatives that we need to do for the continent. We don't have a food reserve on our continent. During this pandemic, we saw lockdown made by the government, to tackle the propagation of the COVID-19. Many countries could not. So now we really need to, strengthen and make a resilient food system in Africa. So this conference that we are organizing, the Food System Summit, it's really timely for us to rebuild and change the narrative of our agriculture sector. Over to you, Dr.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Thank you for those very important comments, reflections, and you will be speaking more to them when Dr. Kalibata will be engaging you in a discussion that we're all looking forward to before we close. We note your points about the fact that there needs to be better prioritizing, and we need to see more and better investments in the agricultural sector if we are going to build back better. So thank you, Your Excellency, and please hold those issues further. We will be coming back to you with them. I'd like at this point to kindly ask our panelists to please respond to some of the questions. So the audience is listening and they are eager to hear, your thoughts. We will read out a few questions and kindly ask you to respond. The first question I have is from okay, we're not sure of this panelist, but it says, I would love to ask the panel, what is the importance of having information in the local language so that farmers can get quality information from fellow farmers? I know I will probably be asking Professor Boga to respond to that. One of the things I think I've learned is that the local language is powerful, but I'll leave that to you, Professor Boga, to kindly respond. You are also very close to the farmers. Second question is, this individual says, I am a medical doctor, but quite interested in agriculture and its linkage to the health of not only the child, but also adults, including pregnant women. There's a lot of malnutrition, which aggravates the increased progression of diseases in Africa. I am from Nigeria. Thank you. So I will, and his name is Dr. Bamboye Afolabi. He's the Senior Vice President for the Pan-Africa Health Alliance. I would be asking you, Dr. Abebe, to please kindly respond to that. A third question is, this person says, I am the founder of a food bank of Angola. How can we receive technical support to supply seeds to poor people that can assist? I think from an on-the-ground perspective, Honorable Minister, you might want to consider that. And just two more questions that I would like to read out. This is from Lloyd LePage, who's a senior advisor with the Tony Blair Institute. And this is for you, Dr. Schengen Fan. What do you believe is the best way to utilize digitization in agriculture and food systems to build in resilience and responsiveness to shocks in Africa? How do we do this beyond, the national boundaries? For example, to leverage on the African Continental Free Trade area. I would also like to ask Dr. Kalibata to contribute in responding to that particular question. And this is also another question. Resilience on development partners to fund research is seen as the weakest point for a strong and sustainable agricultural system. What will it take to build a strong nationally funded agricultural research system to support knowledge-based agricultural development strategy? Dr. Kalibata, in your role, having been a former Minister for Agriculture, for over 7 years, you probably will be very well placed to respond to that question. Dr. Schengen Fan, there's also one more question for you. It says, I'd like you to please give your recommendation on the role of research in generation of technologies, innovations, and knowledge that are critical for driving agricultural sector development. Specifically, what do you think governments in sub-Saharan Africa, some sub-Saharan Africa countries, can learn from the China model of funding its national agricultural research system? So thank you, panelists. And I will ask you to kindly respond. I will start with Professor Boga. Buona PS, to you.
Thank you very much. I think most of the smallholder farmers, especially those in rural areas, for the case of Kenya, speak either a local language or Kiswahili, which is an official language. And I think because of the widespread nature of Kiswahili, extension workers are able to communicate with the local farmers and guide them in their farming enterprises. So, and this is an East African language, almost becoming an African language. I think English would be a problem in some of the areas, in most of the areas. Certainly it would be a problem for my mother if an extension worker were to give instructions in that format. But I think one of the models that AGRA is promoting, which is the village-based advisor, where you get a champion farmer to work with a cluster of 100 farmers, makes it even better because now they're able to communicate among themselves in a language where they are comfortable with. And I've seen this work very well in Kiambu County, where it is being piloted and where we have seen productivity increases, and where we have seen some of these village-based advisors, most of them are women, eventually turning even into agrovets and local agripreneurs working with the community of farmers from within, and using, of course, their local languages. So I think this is quite useful, especially if you are targeting the smallholder farmer. But if there is another language like Kiswahili, which is also widespread, it can be very, very useful. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Boga. I would like to move to Honorable Minister to please respond to the question.
So the Honorable Minister, you mean me, isn't it?
Yes, sir. I mean you, sir.
Thank you. I have noted a question on how can we make small-scale farmers to get seeds, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So what I can do is to share with you the experience we are using here in Mozambique. So since I have told you the structure of our farms here in Mozambique, what we are trying to do is to choose some smallholder farmers and invest in them in order to make them a little bit bigger, to make them aggregators in the community. So when we go with agricultural inputs like fertilizers, seeds, and even some implements, we go and we deliver these seeds to this aggregator. The aggregator, since he works with some 50, 100, or 200 maximum smallholder farmers, they will get the seeds in that aggregator. The aggregator will receive at least one extensionist who will help them to deliver technologies. Since we do that, certified seeds, technology, through the extensionist, it means that the productivity, if the climate conditions are good, the productivity will improve. So since the productivity is improved, it means that this product produced that the small scale farmer has is more than his food needs. for 1 year. And from that, the excedent will go to the market through the aggregator. So the aggregator will have to deduct the cost of the inputs that have been given to the smallholder producer. So this is to avoid giving agricultural inputs to smallholder farmers with no cost. That is not a good approach. So that in this way we do in order to make an inclusive agriculture, so that this smallholder farm can go into agricultural value chain, sustainable agricultural value chain. I don't know if the answer.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. I think we very much understood you, and thank you for actually, being able to speak to us in the language that we can understand. I think we take note of a learning to be able to do translation. I think we're very grateful for your being able to address us, in English. Thank you, Dr. Fan. You're next.
Okay, thank you, Apollos. Firstly, on digitalization, it's absolutely critical to use digital technologies to improve agricultural food production productivity, but also to really build the resilience of our food system. So we learned a huge lesson that digital platform can play a huge role in linking smallholders to consumers without, let's say, the blockages in the middle. With the government support green channels, from point to point, from production point to consumption point. So that sort of direct link to internet platform is very critical. But Africans are facing several challenges. At APRI, we call it the 3 C's: connectivity, contents, and capacity. Connectivity means, there are many remote areas in Africa still facing connectivity problem. The internet penetration is still very low, so that needs to be improved. Then the content, who will provide the contents of the internet platforms, of the portals? I think that needs to be sorted out. The government or extension agencies must do a better job. Then the capacity, the farmers must have knowledge, must have capacity to use internet platform. I think previous speakers speak about the language issues. So all this, the internet-based platform must use local language. So the local community, local population will be able to use it. Now, on research, the question on research, how Africa can learn from China. The first thing, Africa must increase its investment in research. So as a percentage of agriculture GDP, Africa spends about 0.3. China is close to 1. So you need to triple your investment to catch with the Chinese level. But I'm also thinking whether some of the CGIAR centers based in Africa can be transformed as African hub to serve the whole African continent, like a national agriculture research system in big countries like India and China. Because for Africa, many African countries are too small, so there's no skill economy if you conduct very basic research. So if some of the regional hubs transformed from CGIAR centers can provide more basic type of research, and then the national research system can conduct some of the more applied or even more local, like the big countries like in Nigeria and Ethiopia, could also do research. So proper decentralization, proper centralization, proper division of labor among these different levels definitely will improve the efficiency and the effectiveness of the research system. Let me once again to emphasize the importance of increasing investment in agriculture research. Now, simply it's too small, too fragmented, and too ad hoc. So government needs to make a strong commitment on that. Now, there's a question about food banks. I think the food bank is a great idea to supplement the government social protection program, the food bank. So I'm a board member of the Global Food Banking Network. So I can introduce the CEO and the president, Lisa Moon, to you. They can help you. How can this global food banking network build the capacity of local communities, and again, to link short-term relief, short-term help to long-term development. Thank you. Going back to you.
Thank you, Dr. Fan. Thank you, Dr. Fan. I would like to ask Dr. Abebe to please respond to your question.
Thank you, Apollos. I'm very much encouraged by the fact that a medical doctor has asked that question, linking health with nutrition, food systems. This is what we're lacking, and this is what we've been calling for. On the undernourishment side, all the indicators, stunting, wasting, we're not in good shape in Africa. It's not only, the numbers are not only high, but it's increasing. But you have rightly raised the issue, linking it with even adults. One emerging observation is the fact that because of malnutrition, for example, most of the time we are talking about undernourishment. We're talking about hunger and undernourishment. In the African case now, evidences are emerging that obesity has been on the rise in some countries. In West Africa, it is an issue. In Ghana, where I'm seated, in some of the island states who depend on imported foods for much of their requirements, this is becoming an issue, and therefore non-communicable diseases are getting more problematic, which could have been avoided through proper nutrition and healthy diets. The other problem is the healthy diets, the cost of healthy diets in Africa is becoming unaffordable to, well, the numbers indicate about more than 900,000 people in Africa cannot afford what is prescribed as a healthy diet. And on the other hand, we have a lot of opportunities. Just before this session, we were having another meeting in the context of the Africa Forum on Sustainable Development, where we are talking about the same kind of agenda. And one participant from the Republic of Congo questioned, in the Congo, we have lots of forest-based products which we can convert it into nutritious food, but because we do not know how to, we're just wasting them. Which reminds me of the fact that the fact that Africa has diverse, Africa's food systems is diverse, and this may be already she's been thinking about it, Dr. Agnes Kalibata, in her capacity as a special envoy on the Food System Summit. When we are talking about food systems, really, what does constitute? Have we really constructed what the African food systems are? And therefore, the kind of transformation that should happen to these food systems towards nutritious and healthy diets. Are we adequately taking this rich resource, rich diversity into account? This is very interesting. Excellency, the Commissioner, well, I want to congratulate you on your election, but I'm sure you will come back to it. One of the things which we did, and she, under her leadership last year, was, because now we're discussing about nutrition as an agenda of health as it is that of agriculture and food security, the ministers of finance, ministers of trade, and minister of agriculture came together. The African Union Commission, under the leadership of Commissioner, convened them together to discuss issues of food security and agriculture in the context of COVID-19. This was a big, achievement to bring around the table significant actors to discuss issues such as healthy diets. Now, the ministers of health in our countries, the problem is there is a lot of fragmentation. Nutrition, they say, should be a subject under Ministry of Health. The Ministries of Agriculture people would say, no, it is under my agenda, and they don't speak to each other. The agenda is so big, you know, for even for both of them to handle. It requires a lot of collaboration and encouragement. So I'm very happy that the doctor has raised this issue. It can contribute towards improvement of the health of the community, not just of the children, but also of adults, because the most of the non-communicable diseases that are on the rise in Africa are coming because of issues related to malnutrition, not just undernutrition. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Bebe. And before we come to you, Professor Joachim, I'd like to kindly ask Dr. Kalibata to please respond to your question.
Thank you, Apollos. I mean, Schengen has talked to many of the areas that were asked of me, but I just wanted to reiterate one point around research and research capacity and the fragmentation thereof. It's definitely there, and definitely the other challenge we have is also that private sector, government funded research is extremely weak because it is not funded, but also then private sector has very limited capacity to be able to take on research, as you will see in other parts of the world. What we've done in the past, and as really the sole, which was the sole reason to be, I think, of AGRA at the very beginning, was to try to fill that gap. So what AGRA did was to partner with critical institutions on the continent, universities. We partnered, I think, with about 14 universities on the continent to strengthen research capacity. Scientists were got from NAS and trained and given different capacities. And then we escorted the process by ensuring that they got small grants so that they can do research. Now, quite a number of scientists have been trained, over 650. But I think for me, the most transformational thing of that is seeing an institution like WAKI in University of Ghana, or even here, University of Nairobi. Some of the departments that were set up and still exist and are still producing MScs and PhDs that have research capability and can do research. That was number one. And this is something that really will go very far and will continue. But then this energy that was injected into the system is completely contributing to what you were saying, Schengen, around the localization of research. Most of this stuff is coming from CGIR, but making it relevant locally, it's being done by these scientists at the local level in the NAS, and all they need is just a little bit. They don't need a whole lot of money. They need just a little bit to escort the process and help them localize these varieties, which are transforming lives. And we are seeing this happening. So I think we would have to come back at this at some point, because AGRA is definitely not funding a lot of that research anymore. But the momentum it has put in the system, the amount of varieties that are coming out today that are locally relevant, that farmers are using today, whether it's the Agra rice in Ghana or any other, is because of local scientists. And this local capacity cannot be lost. So this momentum will continue probably for the next 3 to 5 years, but then we will have to inject new energy into the system to keep it going. So yes, it's an area that is fragmented, and it's an area where we can do so much more to keep it going. And talking about food systems and their diversity and even definition, I'm just so happy that Professor Joachim is on this call, because he has a lot on his shoulders in terms of defining and helping us understand the real meaning of food systems and how we should be coming at it. But just to put, for me, I put everything back in the context of 2030, right? And the fact that we've already committed to this agenda, and there are a few things we can do, even within our current context. There are a few things we can do, and one of those is fast-tracking what we already know can work, including supporting some of these young scientists that are sitting in research stations that can give us so much value if we just supported them a little bit. So over to you back, Apollo.
Thank you, Dr. Kalibata. I'll quickly like to move to Professor Joachim. Apologies that it sounded as if you were waiting, but it's actually because we know you had joined in and we wanted you to actually listen more so that enables you provide us with, a very robust response on this discussion. As the lead for the scientific group for the Food Systems Summit, we know you're playing a very pivotal role to what sort of decisions governments will make, multilateral organizations, as well as the UN system itself in moving food systems forward, as to see how we end extreme hunger by 2030, but also how countries then become resilient. As the lead for the scientific group for the Food Systems Summit, what sort of evidence are you seeing, that can help us build resilience? And what is it that you would like to see more of, or what are you not seeing that you think is important? What sort of evidence would you like to see better to be able to advise, the special envoy, Dr. Kalibata, as well as the multi-stakeholders from governments, to the UN system on what we should be doing better as a result of the evidence that we've seen to build resilient food systems?
Thank you, Apollos. I'm very pleased to be with you, and I enjoyed listening to this vibrant debate and the focused questions. Excellencies, dear President Agnes Kalibata, good friend Cheng Fang, and I believe the AU Commissioner, congratulations, is also with us. Let me just make a couple of remarks. You have already been digging deep into the issues. My first point is international cooperation is more important than ever in the pandemic. The pandemic has actually forced us to broaden the agenda around the food system and to embrace food system and health system connections. What is done in food and agriculture policy matters a lot for building economic resilience. The indirect effects, I underline the indirect effects of COVID-19 are heavy and diverse. The disruptive consequences on food systems hurt poor people in particular, who spend much of their income on food. Studies we did in 4 African countries recently, including South Africa and Nigeria, on the food processing industries show that especially the medium-sized and small-sized companies suffered from supply chain disruptions. The bigger ones managed. And this impact on medium and small-sized food processing industry, which is very important for the food economy of Africa by now, that has employment and price effects that are bad for people. I would like to underline 5 elements that an economic recovery package should have, at least these 5, quickly. Number 1, low-income rural regions of countries need to be connected much better to centers with markets, with infrastructure, including the digital infrastructure, which has already been addressed a moment ago. This needs scaling, however, and we need to look for new creative financing from the billions of the funds, the creative financing sector, which draws on pension funds and others, looking for good investments that can be an additional source to the public and development partner funding. So that needs to be also on the agenda of the Food Systems Summit, new creative financing. Number 2, when we look at how countries responded with the social safety netting and social security initiatives, more than 150 countries have actively changed their social protection actions, and that is very important in the pandemic. However, that has created debt, and some countries need debt relief. Not wholesale debt relief, means tested, but we need to take a look at the debt burden. Third, farmers and business access to credit and finance is key to facilitate opportunity in the crisis, to grow out of the crisis. And this is one area in which AGRA plays an important role in addition to its support for smallholder productivity. Fourth, we need rapid strengthening of health systems to prevent indirect effects of pandemics on other diseases, which undermine labor productivity. A One Health approach is strategic. Vaccination will ultimately be the key to resilience of people. The rollout of the vaccination in global partnership is needed now. And fifth and last, the fundamental resilience investment is in education and science and technology. Countries that pay attention to that will be more resilient in the long term. That was just addressed, the research and technology aspect by Agnes Kalibata and Chengeng Fang. I add the education, the component is so important that kids go back to school and are getting school feeding and so on. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Joachim. This is really, very helpful. And I think I strongly take note of your point on looking at new creative financing. I recall when we had to, work with member states during the Financing for Development conference in 2015. I think that also came up as a key point to fund and invest in the sustainable development goals. But I think there was a question around the means of implementation. There seemed to have been less consensus among member states, around means of implementation. And I think it's an issue I'd probably like you to, address alongside with your fellow panelists, because quite a number of these issues you've raised here are really critical. But I think means of implementation, it's something that we might want to, dig a little further before we close. So I'll ask you to hold that, and I'll come back to you on that. And thank you again, Professor Joachim. I'd like to move to Professor Hamadi Boga. Buona PS, I want to believe you're still there, even though we can't see your video. And I'll kindly ask you to please, if you can, please do switch on your video. Thank you, sir. Buona PS, you see, one of the things that has been exciting for us about Kenya is the fact that, as a result of COVID-19, you created a war room that actually provided a platform for how Kenya was able to respond, adequately to the pandemic. And I think it's something that, AGRA was part of that partnership in setting up the war room to ensure that we were not just addressing the health concerns, but also addressing the food security challenges. And today that war room has transformed, and this has been under your leadership and your colleagues in the ministry. Can you share with us, what were the factors behind the successes of that war room, and how did you convince, your colleagues in the political leadership to be able to transform that into an agricultural transformation office for Kenya? Buona PS, you seem to be muted.
Okay, thank you. I had been muted by the organizer. Thank you very much, Apollo, Agnes, and all the colleagues here. And this is a very interesting discussion around very critical matters of food security. I think for us, when the pandemic started unrolling out there in China, we had also concurrently been implementing our new strategy, which was the agriculture sector transformation and growth strategy, which is our 10-year plan, which was focusing on some of the critical areas that have been highlighted here. And in that strategy, there was a coordination mechanism, which was structured around the Agriculture Transformation Office. But at the time we were grappling with how to structure it, how to fund it, we had hired some consultants to work on it. But immediately we started seeing the lockdowns and we started getting the first case in Kenya. The cabinet moved very quickly to form 3 committees, one of which was dealing with food security for Kenyans in general and also for the vulnerable Kenyans. And in order to serve this committee with data and up-to-date information, we worked with AGRA and other partners to form what we now call the Food Security War Room. And this Food Security War Room brought all stakeholders on the table to provide data on various dimensions. The Food Security War Room was mainly focusing on, is food available? Is it accessible? Is it affordable? How was the locust being managed? Because at that time also the locust situation was unfolding, and at the same time we had a flood situation unfolding. So we were dealing with the multiplicity of challenges, and so the Food Security War Room came in handy to enable us to respond. And basically, we were looking for data from all sources, and we used that crisis to enable us to strengthen our data systems. And it required collaboration with counties, and we were able to collect data on availability of food. We were able to collect data on the prices. So that means we had to track the markets and make sure that the markets, both for livestock, fish, as well as for crops, remained open. And so at any one given time, we would be able to report to cabinet, yes, markets are open. Yes, prices are stable. Yes, food is available and prices are not escalating. And I think it was a very important tool. And through that, we were able to really collaborate with the private sector and also with counties, as well as with development partners and also within government. And I think one of the key lessons out of this is that some digital tools were developed to enable us to upload this data from the markets and from the counties into a central system, which we are now turning into the Kenya Integrated Agricultural Management Information System. And this is part of what is going to be domiciled in the Agriculture Transformation Office. And one of the other innovations that we did at that time was to basically look at the vulnerable Kenyans, especially in the slum areas of Nairobi and Mombasa, and really identify those who are at risk of not being able to work and buy food. And through the mobile money transfer, we were able to do cash transfers to this on a weekly basis. Therefore, really tackling that problem very elegantly. And also working with the agri-tech companies like Trigger Foods and others who were able to distribute food to the customers all the way to complete the value chain. We were also able to work with input suppliers to make sure that production continued and was sustained. And although now we have learned to live with the pandemic and we no longer call it the Food Security War Room, the functions of the Food Security War Room have now been taken over by the Agricultural Transformation Office. Originally, the objective of the Agricultural Transformation Office was to oversee the implementation of the ASTGS. But inside the ASTGS, which is our strategy, there was one pillar, which is pillar number 9, which is how do you manage risks? And these risks were risks like drought or climatic risks or pandemics like COVID or pathogens like locusts. And in both the case of locusts and also in the case of COVID-19, I think we have come out very well to the point that now there is no panic about food. There is no panic about locusts, and the systems are aligned because we were able to develop guidelines for every player in the value chain to enable them to work in a pandemic kind of situation. And now we have gone back to implementing our SDGs, which was our original goal. And actually we realized our strategy was also built for crisis and is able to adapt. And we are working very well moving forward. Of course, taking with us the lessons from this very, very challenging period in our history. Thank you very much, Apollo.
So thank you, Bwana PS. This is really, really, very, very good. And we note your points on how you were able to use research and evidence, bring stakeholders together, work particularly with private sector to make sure, that food was available, and how you were able to transit. But all that was because the strategy already had components of these that was, able to move things from the short-term response to now building the long-term resilience. So thank you, Bwana PS. I think that was very clear, and there are lessons to learn from that. Distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen at the audience, I'd like to kindly ask you to please follow through with us. We are going to the next phase of this discussion, which will last for about 12 to 15 minutes, and then we will take a parting shot from our distinguished panelists before we close. And I wouldn't want you to miss this discussion between Dr. Kalibata and Her Excellency Commissioner Sako. I would kindly ask that, because we've been pressed by the audience, that we take another 5 to 6 minutes maximum to respond to just some key questions. So I'd like to ask our distinguished panelists to please respond within a space of no more than 60 seconds. I'll quickly go through about 3 or 4 questions that have been raised for our panelists. This is from one of the participants, the former commissioner for the Department of Rural Economy and Agriculture, Madame Rhoda, peace to Ms. Lynn. Madame, it's good to have you sitting with us. And her question is, in the long term, building strong food systems requires capacity to analyze the interlinkages of the dynamics of the different sectors, which have to work together to make a lasting vision happen. And this is important. So how can we ensure that a lasting vision, happens in such a way that we are strengthening resilience and building sustainability? I would kindly ask that Your Excellency, Madame Josepha Sako, to kindly respond to this question. This is another question for Dr. Abebe and Your Excellency Commissioner. The question is, are there some countries in the continent that you can mention as examples in their response to COVID-19, particularly in ensuring resilience of food systems? It will be good to draw lessons from those countries. I know Kenya is one of them, but I think they want you to, if you do have overview of 1 or 2 other countries, so that other member states can learn, from what countries are doing. I think this is this third question is saying that for the first time ever, we have a continent-wide shocks that are challenging both the farmer and the crop, which includes pests and diseases. This may not be the first, but it's actually not going to be the last. What is critical that we should develop continent-wide strategies to build mitigation and responsiveness capacity in the future. So, for example, should we develop special partnerships with the health sector and logistics sector? What sort of partnerships should we strengthen and build better? And I will also be asking Dr. Kalibata to respond to that question. Please, you all have no more than 60 seconds each to respond, and then we will move into the special discussion. I would like to start with Your Excellency, Madam Commissioner. Okay. While we're waiting for Madam Commissioner, Dr. Abebe, please. Oh, sorry. Your Excellency, you're there?
I was muted. I've unmuted
Oh.
my micro. I said I would first of all like to thank and acknowledge the presence of my predecessor, my sister Rhoda Peace, that is here with us, and for a really very brilliant question addressed to me. How do we build the resilience under these interlinkages issues of food safety, food system on the continent? My response will be that since the outbreak of the pandemic, and before that we used to face some shocks of the locusts, shocks of the climate change, shocks of the fall armyworm. So with this, we decided that the way forward is to work on coordination. Interlinkage means that we have to work, all of us together, bring all the actors, the key actors on board, and find solution. That's what we're doing. Our post-recovery program is very clear. We have a task force. We'll be working on how to respond and how to build, resilience on this food system on the continent. So now we created a task force. We have we have all the groups that we are working. We are working on the groups in order to bring solution on the issues that are really very important, like food safety net, issues of availability of input during the season, the crop season, during the crisis, and also the availability of the distribution of food, the market opening of the market, and all this in order to avoid disruption on the supply chain. So all this is an integrated approach that we need to build, and we need to really make sure that during the summit, the food system summit in September, we bring all these issues of interlinkage and bring all the actors on board, like bringing the ministers of health, ministers of trade, ministers of finance, all together, so that we can find, a very good approach and a very resilient food system transformation on the continent.
Thank you, Excellency. Thank you. Dr. Abebe?
Thank you, Apollos. Let me also add my voice to send greetings to my former boss, Her Excellency Commissioner Rhoda Peace Tumusime. Now, to the question of examples from countries, whether there are. One of the things that COVID-19 pandemic has made was put everyone in the same basket, irrespective of your situation. And it was also happening at the same time, simultaneously. It didn't give time for others to learn from the experience of those who experienced it as a problem. So everybody was trying to keep up, to learn from, to improvise. Now, yes, of course, there are, well, it was also a moment of opportunities for leadership in Africa to really demonstrate leadership in times of crisis. And so the answer is yes, and we can mention a lot of countries. You mentioned Kenya, but where I sit, I just want to focus on one country because I can provide a lot of examples using different aspects of how government has really managed. Ghana could be mentioned as one case where government really provided effective leadership right from the presidency in terms of providing support through different instruments, fiscal instruments, through transfers, through many things, and to mitigate the impacts of COVID-19 on livelihoods, on food systems, and so on. They have established institutions and they used them effectively. And this was led by the president himself. But this was also on the back of a strategy that prioritized agriculture and food systems transformation. It's called Planting for Food and Jobs. There is also planting for export and jobs. There is a leadership, a focused leadership that prioritized agricultural development. And so when the crisis hit, it was not very difficult for them to continue to provide that support, especially focusing on those vulnerable ones. As you may have heard, Ghana has become the first country in the world to have received the COVAX vaccine. This can also show how the leadership is very proactive in terms of responding to, in terms of supporting the efforts of the stakeholders in the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Abebe. And I'll move to you, Dr. Kalibata, please.
Thank you, Apollos. I think the question you asked me was to do with how we deal with continent-wide shocks and type of partnerships we need to build to do that.
Yes.
And for me, I guess we need to look at it from two perspectives. The first perspective is maybe what Professor Joachim said, how we all need to start coming together to look at how we deal with some of these global issues. Some climate change, COVID-19, these are things that are beyond what we can do alone. These are things where we need to start forming partnerships to be able to come through, not just on what we might prevent, but also on dealing with the problems that have happened, whether it's dealing with resilience and adaptation and everything that we need to do. But also being able to reduce how we impact even the climate change picture. You know, it needs a global coming together and all of us being able to work together to ensure that we understand what is at stake and all of us are prepared to reduce our footprint and our impact. So there's an opportunity there to really come together as the globe, but also the Food System Summit provides an opportunity for us to look at all those things that are implied in the system and how we can use them to reduce shocks, knowing fully well that the food system itself is contributing to the footprint, the carbon footprint, by at least 30%. But then there are also things we can do from within the continent. And one of the things for me that stands out is at country level, and many of you have said it, I think Abebe said it and others, is how we can start working together, you know, how we can stop working in silos and looking at problems from a perspective of nutrition is a problem of health, but primarily it's a problem of the agricultural sector. And what's happening in the agricultural sector is also affecting the environment. So there's an opportunity for us to look at how we can minimize this, how we can look at partners that we need. From a food systems perspective, we look at food from farm to fork and everything that happens in between, including transport, including consumer behavior, including all the things that we are doing, including waste. And we will not be able to come through on many of these things we are doing if we don't bring all those partners and opportunities together to really look at how each of us is impacting the system, but also the type of solutions that are built in the different areas that we can bring together. So I think for me, going forward, one of the most transformational things is going to be what type of partnerships we bring together to be able to deal with implicit problems, recognizing fully well that this is anchored in a very, very complex problem that is coming from different places.
Thank you, Dr. Kalibata. This is really helpful. Professor Joachim, you know, I know I had raised with you the issue around means of implementation. You will be speaking to that in greater detail, because I think that's a critical thing that we need to see how we can address that before we leave this discussion today. And because we will be building that into some of the actions that, you know, we want to work on, as well as partner with the rest of the stakeholders in the continent on that. And to you, Professor Fan, you know, I will be asking you to also think about means of implementation from the actions that we can do. You know, what's realistic, what's practicable. Dr. Kalibata talked about the partnerships. So, but before, both of you will be responding to that as part of your parting shots for this session. I'll kindly invite Dr. Kalibata to then get into a 10 to 12 minutes discussion with Her Excellency, Madam Commissioner for Department of Rural Economy and Agriculture at the AU. We are very excited at this session that's about to take off now. For the next 10 minutes, we want to listen to two very important women who have demonstrated leadership and demonstrated that women can do things better and can do better things. So we will cede the floor to both of you, and everyone would like to hear from both of you. Dr. Kalibata, Your Excellency, over to you.
So thank you, Apollos. Thank you. Maybe I start by challenging you. If women can do things better, then why am I sitting among men? Now I'm joking. No, that was a joke. But let me just thank you for the opportunity, Apollos, to talk with the commissioner. And Your Excellency, for me, this is an opportunity to really congratulate you and profile you in the work that you have done for this continent. You have done so many things, and I can go through a number of them. But for me, a few stand out extremely that are extremely important. The being able to push through and get the biannual review process to start working and start moving, and have a mechanism that we can use for mutual accountability on this continent, and really seeing that through. That is a milestone for the continent that is extremely important. But there's something else that I personally find extremely important that I don't hear talked about a lot. And this whole idea of getting the continent, country by country, to adopt a resilience strategy is something that is unbelievable, that really puts us right at the center of where the problem is, but also ensures that the continent at this point in time, when we are discussing so many issues globally, when you have such complexity, the continent has a number of instruments it can build on. So the agriculture sector and the sector you're leading is definitely not lacking in frameworks. And I really wanted to congratulate you and appreciate the amount of effort you have put in to ensure that the continent has a clear vision and direction on how it can deal with some of these issues. So I was listening to you soon after you were elected, and I was watching the China Global Television Network, where you outlined some of your experiences over the last 4 years. And something occurred to me. Going to my own experience, I asked myself, listen to that conversation, is there something, if you had not come back to this role, is there something you would have considered unfinished business that really would have felt like, I really wish I had done this or had been able to do this? Did you feel like there was some unfinished business there that you needed to work on? The one thing that stood out for you that would have been a regret if you're not able to do, what would that have been, Your Excellency?
Thank you very much, my dear sister Agnes, for this question and for your summary, talking about, let me just say about the biannual review report first. I want to react on that because, when we assume function, you assume the passive and the positive aspect of your function. And my positive aspect, it is through my senior, my predecessor, wrote a piece that started the initiative of this annual review report, but she was at the end of her second tenure, so she could not do it. So I pick up on that, because when you assume function, what your predecessor did is not, everything is not bad. You need to drive yourself upon that and continuity. That is my belief of leadership. My predecessor cannot be my demon. I have to go and search for the good lessons to learn. And she was already working on this annual review report, which is a milestone for this department, for us to start measuring progress of each countries. As you know that in 2025, our 10 years action plan under our agenda 2063 says that we have to end hunger. We have only 4 years. If we were not passing through this approach of annual review report and scorecard, we will never know the status of each country. So this was really a key milestone that's a road piece left on the department, and I carry forward, and we are on the second edition, and this year we are going to do the third edition of the biannual review report. On you also talked about the resilience strategy in agriculture is also part of the engagement of the Malabo Declaration, the commitment number 6, out of the 7 commitment, build resilience. But our member states, they don't invest in resilience. We can invest in resilience on the community and the crop, the crop system or the food system, but they're not, interested on building resilience. And this is one of the issues that we have to really continue, working with them. You say I was there, you had my CG, the Chinese Global Network interview, and you say, okay, suppose I was not re-elected for the position, what could I been, see as an unfinished business in the continent? My unfinished business is that the goals that we set during the 10 years action plan is not a reality. Through our biannual review report, we set a goal, but we are not on track. Although the second biannual review report, only 4 countries are on track for meeting the, ending hunger, but 36 countries, they did a lot of progress. So I will see that, we should continue bringing CADEP, the Comprehensive African Agricultural Program, a development program on board. Because through that, if you can do the domestication and bring this common flagship agenda to all the 55 member states, I think we reach the transformation, our vision on transforming this department. We can never forget that framework, is really paramount important, for Africa. So all African countries should look at CADEP as their own driver, of transforming the African agriculture. Thank you. Over to you, my sister.
No, thank you, Commissioner. Let me ask you just one more question, because clearly I was going to ask what is your #1 priority, but clearly your priority is going to have to come through on that area. And I agree with you, and I really appreciate your commitment there. Abebe talked about the mobilization of ministers of finance, ministers of agriculture, and ministers of trade, which was a critical milestone. These are people you don't always get in the same room together at country level, never mind at continental level. So really something that we must congratulate you for and recognize. Coming out of that meeting, what is the one thing that you wanted from them that you feel that you got?
First of all, before coming out of this meeting, how did we get it? What was the approach that we could bring them, together under our own platform? It was through this task force that we built, where we brought everything, all the key actors, or partners on board, which is the ministry, the World Bank, African Development Bank, FAO, IFAD, WNP, they were all on board, and the NEPAD. So all of them were on board. So when the ministers of agriculture say we cannot work, is the interlinkage issue, is interconnected, intertransversal issue, the issue of food security and the nutrition. So let us bring the key actor on board. So we brought agriculture, trade, and finance. Finance, as I said on my first remark when I joined our webinar, it is investment. And so our really goal is that we got investment, because our head of state committed themselves under the Maputo Declaration in 2003 to invest 10% of public expenditure in agriculture. And this has not been done, my sister. Even in our biannual review report, when you look, how many countries are investing in agriculture, they are not investing. So we brought them on board. And we discussed this issue. If we want to feed people, we need to invest. So, and it was really clear that the ministers of finance today, if they are trying to do, elaborate their budget, they will take it into consideration. Secondly, we know that in Africa, 75% of the trade is agricultural product and our services. So we brought the minister of trade and taking advantage of our newly tool, which is the African the free trade area, on the continent, the IFCFTA. So we brought the ministers of trade to tell them, look, industrialization is not yet there, but we want to approach industrialization. We need the food corridor. My sister, you remember when we talked for the first time after the pandemic, you told me, you gave me really a good, vision. You say, we don't have food reserve on the continent. And I took it from you. I say, okay, my sister, this food reserve or food corridor has to be really a priority for us, on this, to tackle the issue of the pandemics or any shock. So this one, we brought the ministers of trade on board. They were in that platform, and all of us, we agreed that trade should be really a priority because, everybody, we have opportunity to trade, and make agriculture a business. So that was really a very, very good, a gathering among the three ministers. And when they are during the cabinet's meeting, they can bring all these resolution, all these political declaration on board because they committed themselves. Plus, the funding institution, which is the World Bank, one side, and the African Development Bank. Over to you, sister.
Thank you. I'm going to ask you the last question because, again, we are running out of time, but this conversation is extremely interesting. I had resisted asking you what your number one priority is going to be, but I'm going to go to that because you're passionate on all these areas and it's extremely important. So what is your number one priority in these next 4 years, where you feel like most of us should rally behind and support you? You have all of us here, different institutions. What's your number one priority where you need the most support?
Where I see I need the most support is gender, women empowerment. Because as you know, my dear sister, 80% of the food we eat is being done by a woman. And 50% of labor, labor on the farm, agricultural labor, it is women. And these women, they're still not having their rights, although they work hard, but they don't have all the possible opportunity. Let me talk about to modernize agriculture. These women, first of all, they don't have access to land. They don't have access to funds. They don't have access to science and technology. So they don't have access to irrigation. So all these, we need to really reinforce or empower, our women so that they will be an actor, a key actor also in agriculture, because they've been doing a lot, but there's still this inequality, in the agriculture sector. So this is my priority of priority number one, to really look at the rural, the rural community, the women in particular, and try to build their capacity.
Your Excellency Commissioner, you have a lot of work. I'm looking at your responsibility, Commissioner for Agriculture, Rural Development, Blue Economy, and Sustainable Environment. It's just unbelievable for a continent that is the second largest in the world, for a continent that has the most challenges happening all at the same time. You definitely have 101% of our support, and we are going to be behind you all the way. Thank you for your vision. And really, again, congratulations and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, my dear sister, and thank you for your support. And we are working forward for the success of our food system summit that we are really engaged at the African Union. And we are working closely with the Rome-based ambassadors, so that we can really make a successful, food under a leadership of our sister, a woman, an African. We are so proud of you, my sister, and really good luck. May the Almighty God bless you on this endeavor. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Thank you, Dr. Kalibata. Now you now see why I said women can do things better and can do better things. I'm sure a lot of the female participants here, when they grow up, they would like to be like you. We're very pleased. Thank you again. And now I would like us to come to this critical point where we will try to bring this meeting to a close. So let me give you a heads up. Whatever you say now, word for word, is going to be tweeted. This is not to ask you to paint your words, but to say it as it is, and something you can be proud of to put forward there in the public domain. And I'm going to be, so this is your parting shot, distinguished panelists. So I'm going to start with you, Professor Joachim, because I am deeply concerned about the means of implementation. I know you've been a scientist, but you've also provided strategic leadership globally. For example, when you were the Director General of IFPRI, you and the others. What should we focus on as means of implementation? And then you can add that, you can add in your parting shot that will go on Twitter. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. Yeah, let me just make a couple of remarks. We need a food system summit that is evidence-based and action-focused. But how do we define that action focus? I think there are two ways, and both of them need to come to the forefront. One is not theoretical, it's very pragmatic and practical. We need to facilitate learning from each other across countries and within countries. That's a pragmatic approach. We, by the way, take this approach in many of our studies of the Malabo-Montpellier panel, in which President Kalibata is also a member. Learning from good examples and trying to understand them and then facilitate copying. The other approach is to learn from science-based evidence in certain subsectors of the food system. What to do on value chains, what to do on infrastructure, what to do to accelerate the utilization of the bioscience, the digi-science, and the environmental science. So this two-track approach, I think we need. Then I think you wanted to hear how do we overcome this biggest, what I would consider the biggest market failure on earth, that we have multi-trillion funds on the one hand, seeking useful investment in a zero interest rate environment, and on the other hand, billions of people with great potentials currently having gotten a big hit from COVID. We need to overcome this big market failure by facilitating incubation facilities accompanied by implementation research. It needs the market agents. It will not happen automatically. So government and market players need to establish these incubation facilities, like we have them in the grain markets or in the vegetable markets. We need to solve this issue, bringing together the financial capabilities with the need and the investment potentials and people and the food sector. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Joachim, and that's really, really helpful. Thank you so much around your point on dealing with market failures. Professor Schengen?
I wanted to get a bit real. I think the Agnes mentioned that Africa is importing more than $50 billion food every year. I think the partnership, and Joachim and Agnes both mentioned about a global partnership, international partnership. That what I'm doing here is really try to promote a much stronger partnership between China and Africa through agriculture education, science and technology, investment, and trade. And I wanted to see win-win. So it's not just a win on one side or one win on the, both with China and Africa have to win. And I think there are just enough opportunities to do that. So if Africa can reduce the imports from the global market, maybe in the future it will become even a food exporter, then China actually will gain, because China is also importing probably 3 times bigger than African total imports of food, probably 130, 140 billion dollars food every year. So how can we all work together to make sure that this, the big country and a big continent can really work more to produce more foods, more sustainably, obviously reduce carbon emissions. So that's something we can really get real and get it implemented. I remember when Rhoda Peace was the commissioner, I took her to the Ministry of Commerce here in China. Actually, now they are really looking forward to the engagement with with Ambassador Sacco and with Agnes Kanipata. So when the COVID-19 comes down, when the travel is allowed between African continent and China. Going back to you.
Great. Thank you, Professor Fan. That's really, really a good parting shot. I'll move to you, Professor Boga. Buona PS, your story has demonstrated what political will can do. I remember several years ago, they used to ask me, how do you define political will? So at least I will add your story to that definition. I have 7 definitions, so your definition will be the 8th, and it's a demonstration of what political will can do. What is your parting shot to all of us, here today?
I think the African continent have to implement the CADEP and the Malabo Declaration, especially around the investments. I think it's possible with political will to reach the 10% or even to be near there. I think for us in Kenya, we are still at below 3%. And it is reflected in the production sector because we're not doing very well for some of the commodities. I think the other thing is that we also need to invest the 2% in research and data, especially ag research. Most of our institutions, which have very strong capabilities, are still struggling to do good science just because they are not facilitated. And we are having this debate, I think, this debate with our colleagues in the other sectors so that they can embrace this production sector, which is very critical. The third thing, I think, is we have to embrace digitization and data and digitization and all these data platforms and have protocols for sharing data with the private sector and the public sector. To support the agricultural sector, we have to invest in food balance sheets that are digital, both at the country level as well as at the regional level, because we realize we need the region also to balance our food balance sheets. Otherwise, we suffer deficits. And this was quite evident around the time of the corona or times of drought. And the most important thing, I think, learning from COVID-19 and the locust crisis, we need to invest in risk mitigation strategies, elaborate ones, so that people don't have to grope around when there is a crisis. Instead, there is a playbook that people can use to respond to future crises. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Buona PS. That's really helpful. Your points are well taken. You're going to see them out there. I'd like to move to you, Dr. Abebe. You've worked for the continent and now you're here. What are your parting shots, or what is your parting shot rather to all of us and to our listeners who are watching and listening to you?
Thank you so much, Apollos. It will be a little difficult to be innovative after people like Professor Von Braun or Schengen and everybody has spoken. But let me try. The issues that we are addressing are very strategic. It's about building resilience. It's about transformation. So any piecemeal approach is not going to help. And we need to address issues related to access to resources because we are also talking about inclusive food systems. We cannot achieve that without addressing head-on the issues, the structural issues of access to resources and opportunities to socially disadvantaged segments of the society, but also disadvantaged sectors like the rural sector. Commissioner has alluded to this. Secondly, in Africa, we have a huge infrastructure deficit, and we need to address that deficit in its both soft and hard aspects. The issues around digital agriculture, but also roads, storage, processing, transportation, logistics, skills, and so on. There is a lot of benefits to be had by addressing this deficit. Third, we need to address the issue of incentives to invest and act by all stakeholders. We should not present the situation as if somebody else is going to come and solve it for us. It is about the stakeholders themselves solving the problem, contributing to the solution. It's about the millions of smallholder farmers, the SMEs, those actors and stakeholders along the whole value chain. So what is the incentive? We talk about government not allocating adequate amount of public investment, but what is that the incentive for the Minister of Finance or people responsible for budget to allocate, to increase additional allocations? So it's about our narratives. It's about providing evidences to show that the investment is worth undertaking. Fourth, Dr. Kalibata and others have talked about it. It's about effective engagement of partnerships and stakeholders, including platforms for knowledge and experience sharing. And I think Schengen has given a very good example of what can be achieved. A lot exists, the body of knowledge globally is huge, but that can be facilitated for addressing practical challenges at the local level. So these are the 4 items that I want to emphasize. Let's not forget that the issues, they may seem as short-term, but they are deep-rooted, they are structural, and therefore a more strategic approach would be required. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Abebe. Very lovely. I would kindly like to move to you, Your Excellency, Madam Commissioner, your parting shot to us as, from where you sit at that strategic level. Okay. I hope Madam Commissioner.
I'm okay. I'm okay. I was muted. I had my micro muted. So one of the first things I would like to commend this type of dialogue, conversation that AGRA, organized under the leadership, because we know that our president of AGRA, she is our special invoice of the UNSG for organizing the food summit. Food system summit, and we know that this year, due to the pandemic, we need to concentrate more on these events, because this event to me is a capital, because we want to change the narrative, we want to build back better, we want to create resilience, we want to transform and achieve both the 2 agenda 2030 and 2063, and this is the right avenue that we need to really bring our problems. And the way the process is going on, the consultation process, the dialogue process at the continent, African Union, is fully committed for the success of these events. It's through this event that we come in one voice, in one voice. Africa, we are used to talk in one voice and present our own strategy, the continental strategy, under the auspices of African Union. Because all the policies and strategy are being adopted here. So what we are already working is that all this conversation, all these ideas, all the parts, even the civil society of the stakeholder partners, we bring together, we create it, and then we submit it to our STC, which is an African Union organ of Ministers of Agriculture. So when we go to our summit, what we will agree in a common position so that this Africa should remove its community, our citizens, into poverty, into anger, malnutrition, and whatever, and go to development and build back better and recover from this pandemic that's paralyzed all the sectors for 1 year. I thank you. Over to you, my brother Apollo.
Thank you, Excellency. It's really great hearing from you. The way you speak is very motivating, and like Dr. Kalibata said, we are absolutely behind you, Your Excellency. Can I pass on to the Honorable Minister Banze from Mozambique? Honorable Minister, please. Okay, maybe he's got some challenges with his connection. And finally, I would like to move to you, Dr. Kalibata, to please give us your closing remarks and your parting shot. You're going to be tweeted now.
Excuse me. Thank you, Apollos. Let me just start by thanking everybody for coming, for joining us. Commission, I said it earlier before you came. I know you are in the AFFM today, you are in another meeting, you're in so many meetings, and I appreciate the leadership you're providing for this continent and the amount of work that you do on a daily basis to get things, to keep things going and make sure that the conversation stays connected. I also, Professor Joachim, I know you were in another meeting just before you came here. So that has become the story of our life. And that's what Abebe was saying as well. So, and I know Schengen, we are keeping you from a different meeting as well. So really, this is the place where we get to meet. For you to have prioritized being here with us today to have a conversation around some of these issues that are extremely important to our continent. We really, really appreciate your time and your being with us and the ideas you've shared with us. Really, really appreciate that. Now, I want to end from a food systems perspective. There are a number of opportunities that this continent has, definitely. The opportunity for us to take advantage of what the food systems is offering and the fact that the whole world is ready to have a conversation around what type of partnerships we can have, around how we can all come through. While we are pursuing different things that are important to different people, we also have an opportunity to really double down on many of the things that are important to us as a continent and to ensure that we come through on some of our long-standing problems. There's an opportunity really to form and build coalitions that can move us forward. We have one big advantage. We have, people call Africa the youngest continent, but to put it in numbers, 77% of our population is below 35. These are people that are going to be around in 2063, Your Excellency, that are going to be shaping your agenda 2063. So we have a big opportunity as a continent to really work with everybody else to start reversing this whole climate change thing that is reversing all the hopes we had and dreams we had as a continent of coming through on a functional agriculture sector, on an agriculture sector that can become the launchpad of our development, African development through bringing mass movement of our people out of poverty using what we have at our hand, the agriculture sector, the land we have, but also the number of people that sit in this sector. So this is an opportunity to join everybody else. We have introduced dialogues at country level in this all food systems dialogue to build on all the things we've done, to build on Agenda 2030, to build on what we are doing within the Marabu and the annual review reports. We just want people to look at what they have not been able to come through and to really think through how they can come through differently, but also to help them think through how interconnected some of these problems are by getting different ministries at country level to talk and address the food problem challenge, the food systems challenge that they are sitting amidst. So we really need to move this continent. We will not be able to move it if we don't move our food systems. And I see it as an opportunity for us to join hands. And I thank you, Commissioner, for the support you're providing there and the leadership you're providing. The RBAs have been great. The whole summit is in place and the secretariat is in place because the Rome-based agencies are doing their part. and I really wanted to appreciate the support we are getting from there. So it can only be forward and can only be better. And I look forward to working with you towards September and to bringing this food system summit to deliver the best it can deliver for this continent. But that's because we'll do our part to really come through. So thank you so much, and thank you for your support. And thank you, back to you, Apollos.
Thank you, Dr. Kalibata. I really appreciate your closing remarks and your charge to all of us alongside the other distinguished panelists. I was not going to say this, but I think I should say this. The women have spoken and we're listening. Thank you so much, all of you. It's a good evening to everyone. And for the rest of you joining us from the other side of the world where the day is just breaking, we wish you the very best of the day. Have a good day, everyone, and bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Agnes, thank you for agreeing to speak in our food system dialogue on March 25th. Will be
So,
thank you all.
All right.
Next China, we go to China next. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Very good. Sure.
Thank you, Commissioner.